Hi, I'm MarzGurl.
And I'm JoshKnightTheFirst.
And welcome to episode 2 of MokkoriPlay, the only podcast dedicated solely to all things City Hunter.
On today's podcast, we're going to be covering episode 2 of City Hunter, titled Kill Me, Crosshairs Don't Become a Beautiful Woman. So, I'm going to be straight up with you guys. I thought this was boring.
It was really boring, but I thought it was really interesting that on only episode 2, from just the city of Shinjuku, Ryo has to save the whole world.
Yeah, it's the weirdest juxtaposition in this episode in that the stakes are, literally high, worldwide stakes. This is like James Bond level secret agent mission type stuff that Ryo is dealing with. Mm-hmm. It's just, they gave us the most boring client they possibly could have given us.
Oh, sure. Well, it's not just that she's a boring client, but also that just the pacing of the episode in general is just really, really slow. And I just feel like this is a totally different tone from what you're going to see City Hunter become later.
Well, thankfully, I know this is about as bad as it's going to get as far as not being as entertaining as the other episodes, because like we've warned you guys about that are listening in, things are going to pick up very quickly here in the show within an episode or two.
Well, I mean, I still think it takes a while before it really picks up. I know we're later gonna be introduced to Kaori in a couple more episodes, but even then, just because she's introduced later doesn't mean that it's fully at the pace that you expect City Hunter to be at after a while.
Of course,
it's still gonna take a little while.
But I guess for right now, since we're talking about this episode, let's go ahead and focus on it. So our client for this week is Mitsuko Shimizu. She is a scientist. Her dad, who was another scientist, was working on a product that would be able to help stave off pet population, kind of a way of making pets sterile, and somehow that turned into a bioweapon.
Well, apparently, not only does it work on pets, it works on people, and it's communicable. So you just breathe on somebody, and they become sterile. And that's not good. So this lady, her dad is dead. They didn't say he was murdered, right?
No, it was suicide.
Well, they said, it looked like suicide suddenly for seemingly no reason.
And she confirms, my dad would rather that this knowledge never be used.
And she did confirm, so the only place the knowledge still exists is in my own head. So People are chasing me down right now because they want the knowledge, because they want to make bioweapons out of this. So what she wants to do is make a vaccine for it before anything else can possibly happen.
Now, usually there's a little bit more of an adrenaline rush chase going on through everything. The problem here is that Mitsuko kind of has the same ideals as her dad in that she doesn't care if she lives or dies, which Ryo picks up on. She would just much rather make sure that this doesn't fall into the wrong hands. And so for the bulk of the show, that's the character that she's putting forth. She is only ever really working on the vaccine. She doesn't even give up that much energy when she is pushing off Ryo's advances. She's just, look, man, I'm not even really doing anything in this episode. Just let me do my work.
It's just from a hotel room. She's sitting on a computer. A lot of working on a computer to make a vaccine. Like, I don't see her working with substances or chemicals.
So we were talking about this looking at the episode. Now, I get this is animation, and we've had different things like doctors, scientists, there's a lot of things that we can pull from sci-fi or actual real world knowledge of how medicine works. But to me, for my money, it looks like she had a Sony stereo setup.
Well, it looked to me like she was working on geology. I don't know, or geography, I don't know.
She looked like she was working with a topographic map.
Right, it looked like a topographic map, or that you could see depth, or you could see heat measurements or something.
And then one of the devices off to the side of the computer looks like a breathalyzer machine. The kind you have to blow into sometimes.
Well, think about it. If the disease is communicable, maybe she needs to test, okay, if I breathe, am I passing it to somebody? I don't know. I don't know. It sounds stupid, but, maybe I don't science very well. I don't. That's the answer. The answer is that I don't science very well at all.
Not in this particular case, but neither does the episode. Beyond that, we see that, again, Ryo is kind of pushing himself off, or rather the writers for this episode kind of seem to be wanting to portray Ryo in this kind of debonair, secret agent sort of light, with the way he's deftly dealing with the crooks here who, for the bulk of the episode, we don't know who they're working for. We know that they're foreign. because they speak a lot of English.
There's a lot of really silly English.
Yes.
Even Ryo uses some pretty silly English. You know, he first meets his client at a restaurant, and he's groping up on her, and he gets himself kicked out of a restaurant, and he screams in English, "It's a joke, you know?"
And then later, these guys who are looking to kidnap Mitsuko, they're spying on Ryo while he's doing yoga there in the hotel room, clearly just checking out his package there, because it's right in full view, and they're just saying, "He's crazy." Like, where did you get these guys? I don't understand.
Foreign land. And believe me, they visit foreign land a lot.
Now, to that end, there is something a little iffy, problematic here, in that the guy that they're working for is an arms dealer stereotype from seemingly the Middle East.
Yeah.
And they went ahead and named him Mohammed.
Yeah.
Y'all ain't batting too well in this episode.
No,
Sunrise,
unfortunately
come
not.
on now.
Japan in the 80s. To be fair, they're not much better in the 2000s either, so... Well, I don't know about Sunrise. Maybe Sunrise themselves are better.
Now, for what it's worth, Ryo seemed to be a little bit more out of control this episode with his turbo Mokkori-ness, in that he was feeling up and groping just about every woman in the restaurant. At the very least, we see that he is at least being pushed off with his advances because Mitsuko has a snub-nosed revolver, which she definitely decides to go ahead and point at his crotch to get him to calm down.
Yeah, you might remember, this was what we were alluding to at the end of last episode. You don't want me to shoot Josh in the dick, because Ryo almost got himself shot in the dick this episode.
I believe she would have done it.
She might have done it had he kept going. And you know what? He would have had it coming.
Well, most anything that he did this episode, he was being very egregious about it.
He was really aggressive. The entire episode. Constantly trying to get himself out of his own clothes right in front of her.
Even going back to the beginning of the episode, we see him when he's being briefed on this week's mission. He's literally looking for a piece of ass, or several pieces of ass, from a puzzle he's putting together. And he saved, in his words, the best part for last.
Right, so it's a
butt.
photograph of a woman
Yes.
woman from behind. It's about like a 1,000-piece puzzle
Something
that he's
like
been
that.
working on overnight. And in order to get Ryo to pay attention to the details of this mission, Makimura has said, well, I've kept these pieces so that you can't complete it, so that you have to pay attention now. And even then, Ryo flips the hell out, and then he accidentally destroys his entire puzzle. So now he has no choice but to pay attention.
Now, the thing of it is, we see again kind of these little hints of how Makimura and Ryo's relationship work, in that he seems to have been the guy to help keep him on mission, on point, focused, because his attention can divert very easily.
Well, on top of that, he almost doesn't want to take up the mission because he's like, oh, is it a woman and she's a scientist? Well, then I'm sure she's not very hot.
Which actually brings up another point I almost forgot about, the sliding hands in this episode. There's a couple of...
And we don't necessarily mean from a horny perspective, we mean from an animation perspective.
Right.
Like, not even just hands, just animation in general. Like the table, when the table flipped up and hit Ryo in the face with all of his puzzle pieces on it, the table just slid. So you've got the background cell, maybe there's a character or two on top of the background cell, and then on top of that is the part of the animation you want to actually animate. Maybe somebody's hand, for example, is going to poke a button to call an elevator, right? And rather than animating like the wrist comes up and the finger goes out and it pushes the button and it drops back out of frame, instead they've done the really cheap thing and they just have one drawing of a hand that they've painted onto a cell, and then they have slid it across the film in order to emulate animation.
The same thing happens when Makimoto shows the picture of Mitsuko. His hand slides across the screen to show Ryo this picture, and it looks really obvious compared to the rest of the animation in the episode. To me, the end of the episode had some real James Bond vibes, like the helicopter chase, and they're in a little Cessna there, and Ryo has to shoot her. He promises to shoot her. If she somehow falls into enemy hands, he promises that he will take her life to prevent the secret from getting out of how to make this bioweapon. but instead he ends up taking out the helicopter. She falls out. He catches her with a parachute, and then they parachute to safety.
Which, by the way, in the middle of the rescue mission, he can't help but cop several more feels on the way down. But I guess by this point, she's like, oh, he did such a good job, and he knocked the helicopter out, and I still get to live, and I get to make the vaccine, so I guess later I'm gonna study you. Woo! So Rio actually, gets the girl at the end of this one, even though he's a total creepazoid.
Yeah, it's kind of weird how that works, but again, we see another example of his expert marksmanship because he's able to take down the helicopter with one shot. One bullet, a special bullet, but I think even next episode we're going to get another example of a special bullet.
Even more special bullet, quite frankly.
And again, another thing to bring up from earlier, because we were talking about him hitting on all the women in the restaurant midway through the episode, this is the first case we get of Ryo's super hearing. One of the things you'll end up seeing a lot in different episodes of City Hunter is Ryo has his ear attuned, based off his past and based off his experiences, to the sound of a hammer cocking on a gun.
Right, it's really specifically gun sounds that he's super attuned to. It's maybe not necessarily super hearing to necessarily anything, but specifically to weapons, oh yeah, he picks up on it super fast.
I think with the exception of maybe Umibozu, they're the two main characters that react the quickest to the sound of a firearm being unholstered or being loaded, cocked, what have you. They immediately pick up on it and know danger is just around the corner.
Right.
And beyond that, that's really all that there is to this episode.
I hate to say that this is a tiny episode, because this episode is really boring despite the super high stakes. What a shame, because there was actually quite a bit of really good English that was really funny. The beginning of this episode had some good stupid faces. Yeah, there's really one cell where no animation is happening, and there's these two faces of these dudes that they didn't even bother.
They don't blink, they don't change expression, they're just there in these very not even caring, kind of smiling but not really faces.
The art is just straight up bad, alright? I'm not even gonna lie. Do you know in the Spider-Man game for PS4,
yes,
the prequel to the Miles Morales game that came out for PS5. So Spider-Man for PS4. And you can go all the way out into the middle of the ocean onto this stupid little fishing boat. And there's 2 or 3 character models out there that are just super low res for no reason, but you can get out there. That's what these guys look like. They just didn't bother with these 2 dudes in the crowd of this opening shot.
Well, in that game, that's a throwback to a different Spider-Man game where they did look like that. So there was a reason that was there.
Yeah, that's not my point. My point is, here's some things they just didn't bother with.
Yeah, no, see here, there's no reason for it. They're just there looking as bland as possible.
It seemed like this particular episode, they put as much effort into doing as little effort as possible. In this particular episode, I don't know what it was, but something about animation, you don't always necessarily work on each episode in chronological order.
Right.
So I'm wondering if this was an episode that they produced later than some other episodes, and they're like, crap, we really gotta make some deadline or something, and we really gotta cut out some animation. Or, and maybe that's why there's not a whole heck of a lot of action in the episode. There's not really big major chases aside from the helicopter thing at the end.
There's the helicopter and then the chase earlier on when Ryo takes out the foreign dudes and takes the guy's Luger away from him.
Even that was kind of disappointing.
It was a little underwhelming, but I figured that was the setup, but then the episode didn't go anywhere further with the action.
Right.
Now, admittedly, next episode, we're going to have some more action that'll probably be a little bit more pleasing.
Animation gets better the next episode, too.
But for right now, this episode, I'm not going to say, we're not here to say, definitely watch this one, don't watch this one. I'm just saying, if somehow you chose not to watch this particular episode, you missed nothing.
You really missed nothing, except, Ryo saved the whole world, and we all just slept on it, and nobody knew. Nobody ever would have known there was ever a problem. He just saved the entire world from genocide, and sterilization, and nobody being able to make babies anymore. That would be very bad.
Well, when you look at it from that aspect, of course Ryo would not want to become sterile. That would go against his Mokkori powers.
I mean, he specifically even says so. He says to the lady before she makes the vaccine, look, we've only got so much time. We gotta make babies right now.
She didn't mean it literally, but of course Ryo took it literally, because that's...
Well, she did mean it literally. She meant, no, we're all gonna become sterile if this thing gets out.
But in the broader sense, as opposed to Ryo, who was like, yes, we should copulate right now, right where we are.
Yeah, no, don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. That's assault. Like, a lot of assault in this episode.
Yeah.
Now, again, there was some pushback, but not nearly as much as there will be in later episodes. So this one's not that great for consequences as far as that goes.
It's just unfortunate there's only so many episodes with Makimura in it. So, and this is one of them. So if you miss this episode, it's not like you miss plot, but you do miss Makimura.
And we only have, if I remember counting correctly, we've only got Makimura for another 3 episodes.
Yeah, and then sometimes he shows up in some flashbacks.
But as far as Makimura in our world, in the flesh, alive, we've only got him 3 more episodes. So appreciate him while we got him, people.
He might be the shining spot in this episode.
Even though he doesn't do or say much.
He flies a helicopter.
No, it was a Cessna.
A Cessna, excuse me. He's a pilot, Josh.
That's something we don't actually expound upon, is that he's a pilot. He can fly the plane.
He can fly a plane, Josh.
Like, we didn't think about that. We see Ryo tell him, hey, get the rifle. Okay, yeah, you know where the guns are stored. Fine. But then on top of that, it's like, all right, I'll get the rifle and I'll bring the plane around. Like, where did they get the plane? I don't want to be that guy. But it's like, do y'all have a plane to rent?
Can Makimura hijack planes?
Can he?
I don't know.
Does Makimura have a plane? Because I know Ryo doesn't have a plane.
Ryo doesn't have a plane.
Ryo probably has the Mini. That's in his name.
He might have like 7 Mini Coopers at a time.
Like, he's got a warehouse of Mini Coopers is what I'm theorizing. No, for real. I'm thinking that's how this works, because how does he get them so quick? It might take a while to ship in a new one from overseas. But Makimura, on the other hand, he seems like he's better with money, better with organizing. What if he's got his own hangar? We don't know.
How come we don't see them with hangars later on? Like, he doesn't leave any of that to his sister after he dies?
Well, because we know well enough later on in the series, we never see Ryo flying a plane.
And they're always broke. So I'm thinking Makimura knew better how to handle the money than anybody else did, and later on when he passes away, he didn't leave any information for Ryo to balance the books with. Maybe there's just money out there under Makimura's name that nobody's got access to, and that's part of why they're broke. Cool. Short episode. Alright, you know what, I'm okay with it, because this episode's kind of boring and kind of assaulty, and I'm not real super down with that, so we should get to some other episodes that are just slightly less assaulty, and
it'll improve next episode.
It will definitely improve. These early episodes are rough. They're just kind of rough.
So come back next time when we cover the 3rd episode of the TV series entitled Love, Don't Leave Me, 10 Count to Tomorrow. If you want to catch us outside this podcast, you can always find us both over on Twitter. I'm at JoshKnightTheFirst.
And I'm at MarzGurl. Thank you all so much for listening to our 2nd episode of MokkoriPlay. And if you don't come back next episode, I'm going to push Josh off a balcony.
Wait, what?